So now we have a couple different bones. We'll do this in kind of these sections here. What you have here is the forearm, and that consists of the radius and the ulna. And you guys have any idea whether this is a left or right, front or back? Anyone? Anyone?
Left.
This is a left, correct? And is this palm or is this back of your hand? Back of your hand. You know how I know that? Right in this corner here, you guys see this? This is the elbow. Elbow faces posteriorly, right? So now if I turn this, it's as if you were looking at my hand like that, right? And you can see with the radius and ulna, these guys have an interesting joint configuration. We'll talk about later. Again, there is a syndesmosis joint that's set up between the interosseous membrane between the radius and ulna. And then we actually have a synovial joint here. It's a pivoting joint where the radius fits into the radial notch of the ulna. Now I don't know if you guys can see that very clearly or not, but there's a dip in the ulna here, and that's where the head of the radius sits. That's called the radial notch of the ulna. This is you guys see this other dip here that the trochlea sits in. This is the trochlear notch of the ulna. Here is the coronoid process of the ulna, and then this big old knob here, that's your elbow. That is the olecranon, crane-like, if you will, right? Process of the ulna. The head of the ulna is distal. The head of the radius is proximal, which is kind of confusing. I don't know why that is. That's just the way they named it. And then we have this roughened area right here on the radius, and that is the radial tuberosity. This is where your biceps brachii muscles, both of them, insert and yank on that sucker. Moving down now, distal. We have on both distal sides of both the radius and the ulna, you see this little knob that sticks out? That's the styloid process of the radius, and then this little knob here that's sticking out is the styloid process of the ulna. These are both muscle attachment points for flexor muscles, arm flexors. Moving on. Then we have the hand. Now, official, right now, you guys, I'm never going to put a sticker on and ask you to identify the carpals. Let me repeat that. Carpals you will not have to identify carpals on the lab exam. However, you will have to identify the carpals by name. Like I did on the previous quiz, which one is not a carpal bone? The reason I want you to understand the carpals is if you break one of them, I want you to know that you broke your wrist and not your ankle. So the carpals, make sure you have a list of them and you know them by name, like capitate, hamate, and triquetrum, and pisiform, and all those guys, but you will not have to know the locations. Now, the hand, it's very easy. We always number it the same way, and this is the same as the foot, 1 through 5. Hallux are the thumb. By the way, these are carpals, metacarpals, and then phalanges on that portion right there. So this is metacarpal number 1, metacarpal 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now the phalanges on all the fingers consist of a proximal, a medial, and distal phalange. Proximal, medial, distal. Proximal, medial, distal. However, on the thumb, there's only a proximal and distal. And that is the same thing as on the great toe or the hallux. The hallux here is the same setup, proximal and distal. These are all proximal, medial, and distal. So if I have a sticker around this bone right here and I ask you to specifically name that bone, it is going to be 1, 2, 3, middle phalange, or fourth middle phalanges. Everybody see that? This would be the fourth proximal phalange. This would be the third proximal. This would be the third distal. This would be the first proximal. This would be the first distal. This would be the fifth proximal, middle, and distal phalange. Everybody okay with that? Questions on the forearm before we move on? Go ahead.
Are you ever gonna just have a radius and ulna by itself and ask?
Good question. The question is, would I ever just put a radius and ulna by itself and first of all ask you what it is and what? Yes. And what? Right or left?
Yeah, right.
Yep, absolutely. Now these are harder to tell, but they're still you could still tell, and here's the way I tell. Look, this trochlear notch of this ulna has to face forward. So I already know what anterior versus posterior is, right? And then I also know that this notch of the radius has to face in the lateral direction, because my radius is radical, right? My radius always follows my thumb, and my ulna always follows my middle finger. So this has to be a left, even if I was just looking at this alone, because I know this is facing forward, and I know that notch faces outwards. So if I put it like this, it just wouldn't work right. Okay, so again, you have to become familiar enough with these bones to be able to ascertain right from left. And there's no easy way to do it. You have to know the parts, know what is front and back, what is medial and lateral, and you'll be able to figure it out. Okay, thank you. You can stop that.